The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's a big deal. It guarantees freedoms that are essential to a functioning democracy. Freedom of speech is one of them. It means Americans have the right to express their opinions without fear of government censorship. This right isn't absolute, but it's a cornerstone of American identity. The First Amendment protects all kinds of speech, from political protest to artistic expression, from criticizing the government to simply sharing your thoughts. This freedom is what allows for open debate and the exchange of ideas. It's messy, it's loud, but it's vital for a healthy democracy. Think of the First Amendment like a really good noise-canceling headset. It might not block out all the nonsense, but it lets you hear the important stuff, the stuff that actually matters, the stuff that holds those in power accountable. Without the First Amendment, the government could easily silence its critics, it could control the narrative, it could create a society where dissent is impossible. That's not the America we signed up for, is it? The First Amendment has been tested time and again. Landmark Supreme Court cases have shaped its interpretation. These cases balance free speech with other interests, like national security or public order. The Pentagon Papers case affirmed the press's right to publish, even if it's embarrassing to the government. The documents revealed the truth about the Vietnam War. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the newspaper. Another important case is Brandenburg versus Ohio. The court ruled that even hateful speech is protected, unless it's likely to incite imminent lawless action. These cases show us that the First Amendment is not just a nice idea, it's a powerful legal tool. It protects even the most unpopular speech, because the founders understood something crucial. A society that only protects popular speech is no different from a society with no free speech at all. The United States has long positioned itself as a beacon of freedom, a defender of democracy on the world stage. A key part of this image is its supposed unwavering support for free speech. America frequently criticizes countries with poor free speech records. It uses its influence to promote free expression globally. At least that's what it wants you to think. The U.S. government provides financial and logistical support to organizations promoting free speech abroad. It condemns censorship and the persecution of journalists in other countries. It uses diplomatic pressure to push for greater respect for free expression. All of this contributes to the image of America as a champion of free speech. However, there's a disconnect between America's rhetoric and its actions. The U.S. has a long history of supporting authoritarian regimes with questionable free speech practices. Its own record on free speech is far from perfect. This hypocrisy undermines its credibility as a global advocate for free expression. The truth is, America's relationship with free speech is complicated. It's a bit like a messy family reunion. Lots of strong opinions, some uncomfortable truths, and a whole lot of hypocrisy to go around. It's not always pretty. But hey, at least we're talking about it, right? Whistleblowers play a crucial role in holding powerful institutions accountable. They expose wrongdoing. They bring uncomfortable truths to light. They often face severe consequences for their actions, especially when those actions embarrass the government. Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and Chelsea Manning are prime examples. They revealed classified information about government surveillance, war crimes, and diplomatic secrets. Their actions sparked global debates about privacy, transparency, and the limits of national security. They also made them public enemy number one in the eyes of many government officials. These whistleblowers have been praised by free speech advocates. They've also been condemned as traitors. The government has pursued them aggressively, using espionage charges and extradition requests to silence them. Their treatment raises serious questions about the true extent of free speech protections in the U.S., especially when it comes to challenging the government's narrative. The cases of Snowden, Assange, and Manning highlight a fundamental tension. The government claims to value transparency and accountability, yet it often punishes those who expose its own wrongdoing. This double standard undermines trust in government. It creates a chilling effect on potential whistleblowers. After all, who wants to risk their freedom to tell a truth that those in power don't want told? Section 5, Selective Support. Whose speech is truly free? The U.S. government's commitment to free speech often appears selective. It defends certain types of speech, while actively suppressing or undermining others. This inconsistent application of free speech principles raises concerns about double standards and hidden agendas. For example, the government readily defends hate speech as protected under the First Amendment, even when it incites violence and discrimination. Yet it cracks down on protesters and activists who challenge the status quo, often using excessive force and dubious legal justifications. This selective support for free speech creates a system where some voices are amplified while others are silenced. It allows those in power to control the narrative, to determine which issues are deemed worthy of public discourse. This undermines the very purpose of free speech, which is to ensure a marketplace of ideas where all voices can be heard. The selective enforcement of free speech principles is a dangerous game. It erodes trust in the government, creates a chilling effect on dissent, and undermines the very foundation of a free and open society, because true freedom of speech means protecting the speech you hate, not just the speech you like. The digital age has brought new challenges to free speech. The internet has become a breeding ground for misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. Foreign governments exploit these platforms to sow discord, interfere in elections, and undermine democratic institutions. Social media platforms struggle to combat the spread of harmful content. They face pressure to remove hate speech, incitements to violence, and false information. But they also risk being accused of censorship and suppressing legitimate political discourse. It's a tightrope walk with no safety net. The government grapples with how to address foreign interference in its elections. It accuses foreign adversaries of using social media to manipulate public opinion and influence voting behavior. But its own attempts to counter these efforts often raise concerns about surveillance, censorship, and the suppression of dissent. The digital age has created a complex web of challenges to free speech. It's a battle being fought on multiple fronts, with no easy answers. Finding the right balance between protecting free expression and combating harmful content is crucial. Failure to do so could have dire consequences for democracy itself. The United States often presents itself as a champion of democracy, a defender of free speech and human rights around the world. However, its own history tells a more complicated story, one marked by interventions in other countries' affairs, often with disastrous consequences for democracy and human rights. From the Cold War to the War on Terror, the U.S. has supported coups, propped up dictators, and undermined democratically elected governments. These actions were often justified in the name of national security or fighting communism, but they frequently came at the expense of democratic principles and human rights. These interventions have had a profound impact on the lives of millions of people. They've led to political instability, human rights abuses, and a deep mistrust of U.S. foreign policy. They also undermine America's credibility as a champion of democracy and free speech. The U.S. must confront its own history of interventionism. It must acknowledge the harm it has caused, and it must work to repair the damage to its reputation as a defender of democracy. Only then can it credibly advocate for free speech and human rights around the world. Free speech in the U.S. faces numerous challenges. The rise of social media, the spread of misinformation, and the threat of foreign interference have created a perfect storm, one that threatens to undermine the very foundations of this fundamental right. The government grapples with how to address these challenges without infringing on free speech principles. It faces pressure to regulate social media companies, combat disinformation, and protect elections from foreign meddling. But these efforts often raise concerns about censorship, surveillance, and the suppression of dissent. The future of free speech in the U.S. depends on finding the right balance. The balance between protecting free expression and addressing legitimate threats. This requires a nuanced approach, one that respects the First Amendment while recognizing the evolving nature of the digital age and the challenges it poses. It's a delicate dance, one that requires constant vigilance, open debate, and a commitment to upholding the principles of free speech, even when they make us uncomfortable. Because the alternative is a society where dissent is silenced, truth is elusive, and power goes unchecked. And that's a price too high to pay. Protecting free speech in the 21st century requires a multi-pronged approach. It demands transparency from the government, accountability for those in power, and an unwavering commitment to ensuring equitable free speech protections for all. The government must be transparent in its actions, especially when it comes to national security and surveillance. It must be held accountable for its attempts to silence dissent or manipulate public opinion. It must be willing to engage in open and honest debate about the challenges facing free speech in the digital age. Furthermore, the government must ensure that free speech protections are applied equally to all, regardless of their political views, beliefs, or backgrounds. It must protect marginalized voices and ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to participate in the marketplace of ideas. The future of free speech in the U.S., it's not a spectator sport. It requires active participation from all of us, from demanding transparency from our leaders to challenging attempts to silence dissent, from promoting media literacy to engaging in respectful dialogue with those who hold different views. The fight for free speech is an ongoing one, and it's a fight worth having. Because in the end, free speech is not just a right, it's a responsibility.